we have sticky stuff and we have steroids. And I feel like those two were like divinely inspired, matched in heaven. Like sticky stuff and steroids. First of all, the alliterative I love entirely, but second of all, they just need to be together. They need to be discussed together. I feel like we have Jekyll and Hyde. It's wonderful. So the baseball officials will be cracking down on both from now on. Not that they haven't been, just that this season they want to make sure that they're going to crack down on everything more intensely. There was an uptick in spin rate at the end of last season that they were really worried about, and so they're really harping down on the sticky stuff. Let's jump into that really quick. They're going to check hands as well as equipment. They implemented checking hands late last season as well to deal with this increased spin rate thing. So that's not necessarily new, but it's getting, I think, new attention. But I thought this was the interesting part. As of this season, they're going to check starters must be checked more than one time, at least 2 times. You have to check the starter, but there is no cap on that. They could check the starter every time he enters the game, every time he comes off the mound. They could check the starter. So I thought that was really interesting. You have to check all relievers at least one time during their tenure in that game, and they can also check all position players as well in a given time.
The position players, I think, is new, and that's actually a really good idea because, I mean, we saw, first off, a couple of years ago, that play where Yadi Molina had the ball stick to his chest protector.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a whole lot of pine tar, first off.
Yeah,
like,
buddy.
that is super obvious, right? So, you know what he's doing with it. So,
for sure.
Yeah, like, clean that up, and then, but there were certain guys like Jay Buhner had a spot on his hip where there was always pine tar. There's some other guys who have it, like Justin Turner has it on his shoulder
every time.
The one where the bat doesn't rest on.
Correct.
So there's stuff like that.
Very strange.
Yeah, it is very strange. But I think it's smart because they specifically saw spin rates drop after they cracked down on at the beginning of the year. And then to see it coming back up again, it's like guys figured out the how to get around the inspections.
That's right. So, and the reason why the hands are so important, even though they were included last season, is because in a 25 March memo Major League Baseball issued to all teams, it included this quote, if an umpire observes a pitcher attempt to wipe off his hands prior to an inspection, he may be subject to immediate ejection. That's huge. They're like, don't conceal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's you can't attempt to conceal anything. Or we could, without cause, just throw you out if we perceive your attempt to conceal. I think that's pretty interesting. I like how harsh it is as a memo. I don't know that I'm going to like how harsh it is if it happens in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like,
on paper it's like, yeah. On paper it's like, oh, that's great. But then, you get into the game, we're like, nah, it's pretty. Because, like, the thing that's funny. The thing that's funny is that, like, I can't even remember the guy's name anymore. I blocked him out of my mind. The Mariners pitcher who was, like, the first one to get busted for it, and they locked away his bag or his glove in an evidence bag and then ejected him. And I remember, like,
going to for bat. PEDs.
I remember going to bat and be like, man, it was sunscreen, like, everywhere, blah, blah, whatever. Then the dude gets busted for PEDs. I'm like, kick him out. Don't let him come back. We don't need him.
Get out of here. Go play in Taiwan. Yeah,
exactly.
So let's get into steroids. So Major League Baseball fully suspended all testing on performance-enhancing drugs during the lockout. They were not allowed to interact with the players at all. We covered that in previous episodes. But what was interesting is that the New York Times issued a report, an article that did a ton of investigative reporting. I really enjoyed it. The low-dose creams and oils could remain undetected. So if you do a heavier dose, you do larger, like these bigger chemicals that are going to stay in your system longer, they would remain detectable even now. So let's say a guy knew there would be a 30-day, 60-day lockout at least. I don't think anybody saw a 90-day lockout happening. But if they saw, like, I know it's going to be 30 to 60 days, I'm going to inject this, it's going to be heavy, yada, yada, whatever, right? Those heavy doses would still be detectable in spring training right now, right? But oils and creams would not be. They are almost all traces of them are almost all the way gone within very short amount of time. But what was interesting is that the New York Times reported that the benefits of those, even after detection, would be months worth. Could be up to 4 months, depending on how it was used. Just for cream.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, especially since, like, I mean, what you're doing with it is you're basically using a ton, right?
Yeah.
Because if you use a little bit, it's used to like level out your testosterone levels. Like having worked in a pharmacy, there were times where I was like, those things were flying off the shelf. I was grabbing them 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, sometimes 10 times a day, and we could barely keep up with it.
Wow.
And I actually specifically asked a pharmacist, like, so does this stuff like work really well? He's like, yeah. He's like, it'll make you feel like you're 16 again. If you're 35, 40 years old, he's like, you'll feel great. He's like, wow. And if you're an athlete, put some extra on there, you're good to go. He's like, it's a big deal. So,
and this is like hormone cream. Is that what we're talking about
here? Yeah. So it's since testosterone is we don't get into the science, but basically it has to go in through like an oil or some kind of method to be absorbed into your skin, or it has to be an injection.
Right.
I like the ways that those are done. And so these were mostly like a gel. What we were primarily doing, they come like a little packet, squeeze a packet so that it's dosed, so you're not using too much.
That's cool.
But they also have like a meter dose like pump where you could like pump it on your hand, rub it, put it on your arm or whatever. And yeah, they said it's like basically the miracle drug. And if you use too much, then you'll feel it for sure.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Yep.
And undetectable after a short amount of time, which I thought.
And I could see that too. Because you're using those low doses, you use them every day. It's not like you're going to overdose on it. So
yeah,
it's not going to stay in your system for too long. But one thing that's really interesting is you mentioning this, and then seeing that Vlad Guerrero Jr. lost. Did they say 30 pounds?
It was around 30 pounds.
About 30 pounds in a month.
Yeah.
So let me tell you the other thing is a friend of a friend of a friend who decided that he wanted to take steroids to be a better slow pitch softball player. It was a real thing, Brig. It was a real thing.
What? Better slow pitch softball player.
Better slow pitch softball player. And he said, if you're on that stuff, he's like, if you're on the juice, he's like, it doesn't take anything to cut weight. You're cutting fat, sitting watching TV.
Really?
So I'm not saying
interesting.
But
no, this is just what
this is
some of the compelling arguments that justify it in the minds of these players. That's the point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
That you don't even have to be in it to build muscle. That if you just want to slim down, that's your way to do it. It's an
or
easy
injury
way
recovery, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's another reason.
That was Andy Pettit's excuse.
Yep.
All the way to the bank. So
yeah, it makes sense to me.